Hey guys, what's up? It's filtersc here, and I'm back for just a little bit of a quick tip video. And this one's for all you in kind of mid to lower level leagues, where you're dealing with a lot of like the really hardcore cheese, the stuff that's super all in. And typically you can stop it if you know how to scout it, know how to react to it. But a lot of players at that level don't necessarily know how to even scout properly for that, or they're not bothering to scout because there's other things that are more important to work on. So when you run into these games, the first thing you have to keep in mind is they are a lot more common in lower leagues. So when you are playing in Gold League or Platinum League or whatever, like those builds are way more common. Bronze and Silver, like there's all kinds of weird cheese like that. You have to be a little bit careful. You don't want to play super greedy when you're playing against those opponents because it's not uncommon for them to throw one of those things at you. Now, my experience is more or less like, when a new account places in Platinum League or an account that I haven't played on in a while places there, and I've got to kind of play my way out. I'll run into a lot of this stuff, especially in Plat. It starts to trail off a little bit more in Diamond, and then once you get into Masters, you see a lot less of it, and a lot more, you'll still get cheesed, you'll see more aggressive, like 2-base stuff that's a lot more technical, requires heavier micro, and requires the ability to transition if it doesn't work. So it's less all in. And much more designed to do damage when you start to rank up. Whereas a lot of these builds just flat out have to kill you or your opponent's screwed, right? So with that in mind, we're going to talk about that and how you can kind of get through it and just mentally like figure it out and not have to worry too much about it as you go on. And let's jump right in. So the first thing is it's a lot more common in lower leagues when I watch streamers or even my buddies play. In a Gold League or whatever, or I go look at All Things Terran and I'll see those builds all the time, or All Things Zerg, All Things Protoss. You see people struggling against this kind of crap all the time. So what does that mean? Well, it means the first thing is don't examine the games too hard. When you do lose to something that's like, 1-base cheese or whatever, or like, a super fast proxy oracle, really fast roach rush, that kind of stuff, like don't worry about it. Maybe a 6 pool gets thrown in there, proxy reapers, that kind of stuff. Some of it's like quote unquote legitimate, but the vast majority of it is just like really super all in, kind of trash tier cheese. Now there are exceptions to players that are able to do this at a higher level. An example would be somebody like Maximus Black, who's one of the only players that can make his super proxy oracle work at that level of play. Other players have a lot more difficulty with it. I don't know what it is that makes him special about it, but he's capable of making it work at a little bit higher level than typical. But the one thing to think about with these games is, if your opponent like barely beats you with like a big roach rush or barely beats you with a proxy oracle or whatever, maybe he just kills you like really fast and you lose. Don't jump into the game and look at the replay and try to figure out, oh, well, if I did this, don't worry about that. That'll all come as you get better and more experienced. You'll get much better at scouting that stuff. You'll start to figure out the correct reactions. You'll figure out how you can effectively stuff that kind of stuff and not have to worry about it nearly as much as you used to when you're at your lower league or whatever. The other thing to keep in mind is like, what are you trying to work on? Why are you playing ladder? What are you trying to improve? So if you're trying to improve and get better at macro games, and you run into some guy who does like a crazy proxy oracle to you, and you're not even scouting because you're just like, I just need to make sure my my home is taken care of and my base is taken care of and I'm playing well that way. You're probably going to lose if you don't scout that build. That doesn't mean you have to go out and scout every game, right? But what it does mean is you have to be capable of saying, okay, whatever, I lost. That guy can have his points. I'm going to move on. I'm going to get better. Because these games are over quickly when you do face that kind of stuff. So just GG early on and get out. Don't try to scrap yourself out a win or anything like that. You're only going to get more frustrated when you do face these things. So don't examine them too hard. Don't sit there looking at the replay trying to figure out what you could have done better. Just don't even worry about it when you get like a hardcore early game cheese. Just move on. Hit up your next game and just block it out of your mind. I know that's an easy thing to say and a hard thing to do, but it's really important to have that mentality. I'll get frustrated if I lose to like 5, 6, 7, 8 of them in a row or something. But most of the time it's like whatever, man. Like I'll lose to a 2-gate one game, the other game I'll stop it. I got proxy 1-gated a couple times today. One time I did lose the game, although it wasn't specifically to the 1-gate. The other time I won the game really easily because I stuffed the 1-gate taking no damage at all. So you have to keep that in mind as you go on. Like it will balance itself out. You will be able to handle it much better as you move on. However, if you are thinking about this and you're like, man, I lose to this stuff all the time though, I really need to get better at stopping it. Well, you need to examine what you're doing with your build order. Are you taking your gases too fast? Are you, cutting units to get everything up? Are you building barracks that are no longer, they can't produce units because you're spending the money on barracks rather than units? That's where the majority of these losses come from, because players in lower leagues will simply not make units out of their barracks for a minute or two while they try to build everything. And while their infrastructure might look really good, there's no units there to defend anything, right? And the other reason these losses happen is because they don't handle the micro that well. And when I say something like that, I mean, like, it's actually quite difficult if somebody does, a couple of early Reapers, and you are a Gold League player, you're not that good at micro, and you get, a couple of early Reapers in your base, maybe not even like from a cheese, just from a player who has decent micro, and all you have really is like a Marine or a couple of Marines or something like that, and you're trying to micro against those Reapers. It's hard for you to pull, 2 or 3 SCVs only, and micro the weakened ones back so they don't die, so you take minimal damage, because that's the important thing to holding a build like that, right? And if your micro is not quite there yet, you're going to lose a lot of those games, because your opponent, the level of micro required of your opponent is much lower than what you have to do to hold it, right? But as you get to a higher and higher level of play, both players' micro will get better. The player that's doing that cheese, there's only so much you can do with his units, right? And if the defending player's micro is on par, eventually it reaches a stage where the defending player has the advantage, because the micro level is about even, right? Where he is able to control his SCVs properly and pull out the injured ones and make sure he doesn't take nearly as much damage as a low-level player who just pulls out like 10 SCVs, leaves them on attack move, doesn't get any money, well, he's not mining, or he pulls all of them, he's not mining, doesn't get any money, he can't make extra Marines, his Marines die, and the game's just a giant snowball from there, right? So just keep that in mind, guys. You're going to face a lot of this crap on ladder. There's not much you can do about it. Just stay focused. Just remember what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish, how you're trying to get better, and just move on from those games as fast as you possibly can. And remember that as you start to get better, and as you're able to kind of hold this stuff with your minimal units, right, with your couple of Marines and a few SCVs, if you're still facing those guys in Gold League doing that stuff, chances are, if you defend their cheese without taking any losses or very few losses, their follow-up is going to be very poor, which might mean they might just continue to make Reapers in a situation where it doesn't actually make sense, or it might mean they can't really play a macro game, right? They can't follow it up, they can't play behind it. That's something that quite often happens to me, right? I will play games in Plat where the other Terran will do a 1-base like tank Marine Banshee push, and I'll defend it, and I'll be down 20 workers, I'll be down 10 to 30 SCVs or something like that, right? And I'll still be able to come back and win the game, because my opponent is not capable of playing with me on a level when we start talking about multitasking and just general overall macro, and I'm able to come back and win those games. A lot of you guys are not going to be able to do that, because your opponent's going to be quote-unquote about equal to you in skill level. But as you get better, you're going to be able to start defending those attacks much, much better. You're going to recognize them much, much earlier, and you're going to be in much, much better shape. So again, guys, this video has gone on for a little bit longer, but it's more of a pep talk and more of a, I don't want to give you specific examples of how to hold all the different kind of garbage cheeses, because there's a lot out there. Just remember, if you lose, just move on real quick. Don't adjust your build a whole bunch. The only thing you can possibly do is, stop cutting those early units to get the extra barracks out. So maybe examine if your production structures are being properly utilized. And from there, you just got to make sure you micro better, you play a little better, and don't worry about those games. Don't let them get in your head, man. You can lose 5, 6, 7 of those in a row, and it's pretty much irrelevant if you're able to then, play a few macro games against people and just destroy them. Or if you're able to hold some of the more aggressive cheese, the 2-base stuff, much, much better than that kind of early stuff. Like I said, I lose to it too, man. We all do. You just got to move on real quick, and you'll see it less and less as you get to higher levels. That doesn't mean you see less cheese, but you'll see less of the really stupid 1-base stuff. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with on this is just a simple, quick point. The players that do that over and over will eventually get tired of it and bored. And that's part of the reason why you see in higher level games, it's rare to see somebody who only ever does, just one really fast, super all-in, super hardcore cheese, and that's all they're capable of doing. Because at the end of the day, when both players end the game, even if they get the win, the guy who loses doesn't really give a shit, and he just moves on with his life and gets into the next game as fast as he possibly can, because it's pretty much irrelevant. If all you're doing is playing 5-6 minute games where you roll the dice and you hope you win, Nobody's really learning from that. Nobody's really getting better, and both players tend to understand that. So you see less and less of it as players rank up, because quite honestly, it's pretty damn boring to play either against or play as your primary play style. Very few people can handle it. And again, guys, this is a little bit of a pep talk. Just don't get down. Don't worry about that crap. Just move on. And I'll see you guys next time. This is filtersc, and I'll talk to you later.